If you were meeting somebody in this part of downtown, you might say, meet me beside the space age kind of building. Well, space age isn't really the 21st century. It was the 50s and 60s, and it was very exciting. And Canada played a huge role right up until the era of the space shuttle. Here's a Throwback Thursday look at Canada in space from iChannel. Hello, I'm Alan Bonner. When most people think of Canadians, they don't think of us as part of the space race. But we have been for about 100 years, since Douglas McCurdy flew the Silver Dart in Baddeck, Nova Scotia. But aside from the Canadarm, Roberta Bondar, Steve McLean, Marc Garneau, and our other astronauts, very few people really know the extent to which Canadians are involved in the final frontier. But that's going to change right now on At Issue. Now, we as a country were pretty early in communication satellites too, Anik 1, early 70s, and some people speculate it's because we've got all this geography and not a lot of people. We need to use satellites, cable, telephone, internet, other communications vehicles. If that theory is right, how does that translate into what you're doing? Why do we also use space just for pure scientific study?
Well, as the third country in space, we were the ones who were there because we had scientific interests. We weren't really there because we wanted to beat the other guys. We thought, we could do something interesting here. And a lot of the people who did that pioneering work came from places where they were able to study the aurora. And so we were really interested in the upper atmosphere, and it's over time that we've come down closer and closer to where we live, the things that impact us more directly in our day-to-day lives.
Could this have been people from remote parts of Canada where you could see, the
aurora,
beautiful stars and the aurora borealis and say, hey, let's study that?
Yep, there's an absolute fascination with a lot of people that I know in the atmospheric community who look up at the sky and think about, oh, what could we look up at?
All right, and then the next big deal is this marvelous moment in the 80s when, courtesy of your company and its predecessor, we see on the American space shuttle a great big arm with the red Canadian flag on it, and the American commentators saying, the Canadarm is going to do this, the Canadarm is going to do that. And I think they got sick of saying it. They finally started calling it America's Space Shuttle because I got the impression they were worried they were going to think it was all ours. How did that come about? How did the Canadarm come about?
How the Canadarm came about? Well, through the National Research Council, basically Canada wanted to contribute to the space shuttle program. So NASA was developing the space shuttle. Canada wanted to contribute. So Canada provided funding towards building the first robotic arm, the Canadarm.
Yeah, but let me get the why before that part of the explanation. Who woke up one day and said, let's get into space and let's build the Canadarm? Industry Canada? Was it a political move? Was it in part Spar Aerospace? Or what was the impetus for this?
It takes both players. There were people at Spar. John McNaughton was one of them. There was someone at NRC. Carl Deutsch is another that started to work together. It takes both sides, a capability and a government leader to try to get the money together and to convince the government that this is going to be a good way to spend money. And when they do these things, they don't know they're going to be a success. This is a huge risk that these people take. And John McNaughton was actually the vice president of SPAR, and Larry Clark was the president. And that had spun out of de Havilland, which is now Bombardier. And so they had connections with all of these people. And this earlier STEM thing had given them the reputation for being able to do these challenging mechanical things.
Okay, so how do we talk the Americans into this? I mean, they're moving along swimmingly, going to the moon, and
nobody wanted it. They thought it wasn't important. They didn't understand the importance of it. So they wanted Canada to do something, and the Americans didn't care. Nobody knew robotics were going to be anything, which was why we were allowed to do it. After that, after we did the shuttle arm, everyone wanted to do robotics because it's so visible. But it was this amazing coup that nobody wanted it.
And yet somebody still had to talk NASA into taking onto their vehicle this Canadarm that was our technology
they
with
knew
a flag.
They wanted an arm. They just thought it would be, one of those things, one of those messy things, and we're going to need one because they had those big shuttle bay doors to open and to pick things up. So they knew they needed something like an arm, but they just thought it's just a tool, but they didn't care about it.
First red paint in space?
Oh, that was a Canadian government man who kept insisting we've got to put this word Canada on, and nobody was paying much attention. And normally, paint in space before that was either black or white. for thermal reasons. Either you want it to cool it off or heat it up. So paint in space can't outgas. So you have to have special paint. So red paint, even to find red paint that you could put in space, was very, very difficult. And after it was done, and it was such a success, people from all over the world were calling the guy to find out, where did you find this red paint?
What is the manifestation of this for the Canadian taxpayer? Because you mentioned it's expensive. What does the person viewing this program get out of this space exploration and the research that you're doing? Let's start with you, Sherry.
Well, we have this little device which we're building for space stage, which is currently being used on Earth to help people's balance system. If you apply electric current behind someone's ears, you can make them feel like they're moving when they're not. And that has applications for the computer games industries and astronaut training. And for people as they get older, that their vestibular system starts to break down. So eventually maybe we can help people not fall over.
Richard.
Well, one of the things that Sherry brought up earlier was with the Canadarm. NASA originally didn't think they needed a robotic arm. They wanted one, but they weren't sure how useful it was. But then very soon after the original Canadarm was given to the U.S. by Canada, basically given to them as a donation towards their program, NASA realized how important it was, and they spent their own money. They spent in return over the years over $1 billion. They bought 3 more Canadarms from SPAR, MDA, and have since, even today, they're still sending money to Canada to support those Canadarms. So Canada had put up a certain amount of money, $100 million, Sherry indicated, and in over the years, 10 to 1, they've received back in imports back from the U.S.
That's good business. And Kaylee?
Our interest is in trying to understand our atmosphere. So that's where we live. That provides us with the ozone that protects us from UV rays from the sun. We're going to be worried about climate change. We're worried about air pollution. And our measurements are those things that provide inputs for policy so that government knows how we need to regulate different types of chemicals.
Is this all about national prestige? Is it about research? Is it about making money? What is our involvement in space all about, Sherry?
I think it's all of those things. To me, it's mostly a Canadian pride issue. I don't think it's easy to make Canada proud, and I don't think it's easy for us to go out in the world as a small country and brag to people what we've done. So having done this, the world knows. They're impressed, and we're happy.
Richard.
Well, I definitely think pride. Just in June of this year, 2008, there was a national poll done. What is most fascinating about the poll is that Canadarm was number 5 of what defines Canada. We were up there with the Maple Leaf. We were up there with hockey and the Beaver. I mean, the Canadarm 5, or Canadarm being the 5th place, we beat out Gretzky. We beat out. So it shows just how much people are proud of the symbol of Canada in Canadarm 2, or Canadarm. And so I think that really says a lot. But I mean, it's also, it is also addressing the needs of the people. When you talk about Earth observation and stuff like that, it's serving a purpose for Canada, and it's also a very huge sense of pride to the people.
Kaylee.
And on top of that pride and our contribution, we make a contribution nationally, but we also make a contribution internationally. Science is something that doesn't have borders, and the fact that Canada is able to contribute in a significant way from our satellites, from our scientists, from our engineers, and from our technology is really important, and I think we should all be proud of that.
One of Canada's proudest achievements in space has been the Canadarm and the subsequent release of its next generation kin, such as the Canadarm2 and Dexter. And Richard, just before the break, we were talking about this is the arm that beat Wayne Gretzky. More people are proud of the Canadarm than of many, many other Canadian symbols, and good for you and good for the Canadian government people who thought it all up and so on. Tell me about the next generation. Where are we going with this piece of technology?
Well, Canadarm2 and Dexter are fantastic examples of how we carry the technology from Canadarm. So Canadarm2 is basically assembled the space station. There would be no space station without Canadarm2. And Dexter, which we just launched earlier this year in 2008, to carry on and really the next generation by maintaining it, so the fine motor skills. But also the technology we develop in the robotic systems for space, it's also taken what we learned from those robotic systems and applying it to terrestrial applications. If you look at mining, nuclear, medical, There's some really amazing things that are being done with space technology.
I don't want the show to expire without knowing as many of the Canadian contributions to space exploration as I can get on the table. I'm getting the impression, I certainly have the strong impression from you, Richard, that we have a lot of wires and gizmos and lines and capabilities and grappling hooks and what have you. Anything else that comes to mind before we take a break, Kaylee?
I think it's just in terms of instrumentation as well. So we're not just building subsystems or parts of things or communications. We actually can build the instruments that you need to study the atmosphere. There are Canadian teams, as Sherry mentioned, who are interested in building rovers that could go to Mars, they could go to the moon. And so we have these technologies which we can work in partnership with between industry and the Canadian government and international organizations. So I think we got a lot going on.
All right. One of the great things about sitting around this table is that on the other side of it, there are usually very, very smart people, and that's the case today. Engineers, scientists are often great dreamers as well. We have a couple of minutes near the end of the show for you to dream in front of our audience. What would the future be of Canada's role in space if we had the dough and we had your way?
Well, I want us to go to Mars with my flying saucer and hop around and find water and find out if there's life on Mars. I think that has major implications for humanity if we understand that we're not the only ones.
And why a saucer? Is it for aerodynamics or?
No, actually, there's not a lot of atmosphere. It's there to maximize the solar cell area and to keep the landing gear as wide apart as you can so when you land, you don't tip over.
Didn't the AV Row company do a flying saucer?
They did, and that was really the spark of this idea. And it sort of breaks my heart that it was done so long ago, and we could do it so much better now.
And Canadians invented the UFO. All right, Richard.
Well, I think this is similar to what Sherry was saying. I think going to the moon and Mars is definitely something I would love to see Canada take part in. In particular, if you look at what we contributed in the past, mobility solutions like mobility for the shuttle and space station through robotics, developing a mobility system for the moon and for Mars, like a rover. That's a very self-contained unit that is a crucial part of any sort of infrastructure for a lunar base. Or you need to get around. You need to get the science out to outposts, to locations away from the outpost. So it's something like that, a very critical role. It's small enough that Canada can take it on themselves, but crucial. And also very visible, just like the Canadarm2 and Canadarm. All the eyes of the world are on what's moving in space. So all the press coverage is on the Canadarm. So if you have a rover with the Canada flag, stenciled on the side, all the cameras are going to be on the rover. Great fundraising naming opportunity for some enterprising company. Kaylee, the last word to you.
I would say we've got to continue looking at our own planet, but I would follow up with what Richard and Sherry have said, that the next place to go is to Mars, because we've done some really neat things in studying our own planet. And there are a number of us in universities across Canada who are saying, okay, now that we understand our atmosphere and we're trying to get better at that, can we apply this to Mars? Because if you're going to take people to Mars, you want to know what the weather's like. And so we can tell them all the way down what the weather is like.
I'm Alan Bonner. Thanks for watching.